Greetings. I'd like to give special thanks to Dalek Supreme 13 for their financial contributions in helping me pick out this week's anime. I realize the contribution was made quite a while ago, but I'm not one to finish too early with this kind of thing. Okay, look, I've tried to come up with a good way to start this off. I was trying to go for some semblance of an intellectual standpoint, but that doesn't really fit with Panty and Stocking. Like, just listen to the show's name. Panty and Stocking with Garterbelt. Like, that just sounds, from the title, like prime A intellectual content right there, doesn't it? I'm not saying that the show's not smart in any way, but any semblance of intelligence that it has is buried beneath this raunchy layer of sex, sweets, innuendo, and fan service. It is also one of the most non-anime anime that I've ever watched, but it is at the same time most certainly an anime, as it fits all the criteria that traditional anime, or Western anime, fans give it. It's just that the amount of Western influence in this series is undeniable. I think I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. Before we go balls deep into this shindig, I give greetings to you, ladies, gentlemen, and others. My name is Arcado, and welcome to Glass Reflection. Today, Panty and Stocking with Garterbelt. Let's jam, bitches! Welcome to Dotton City, a hellhole of sin and debauchery. Also a place where walking 10 steps without swearing or making a 90s pop culture reference might as well be considered a crime. Ghosts inhabit Dotton City, foul creatures spawned from the hate and negative emotions the populace has on a regular basis. They appear where you least expect them to and wreak havoc, causing mass destruction everywhere. The city's only hope is 2 heavenly angels sent down to exorcise these ghosts from existence and save the city from destruction.
Having a good morning, Panty?
That's your cue to go, sweet cheeks.
So I'll call you and
And how you feeling this morning, Stocking?
Fuck off. Don't talk to me until I've had my goddamn sugar.
Our heroes, ladies and gentlemen. Lingerie and her sister Leggings aren't your stereotypical angels. In fact, there's good evidence to argue that they aren't really angels at all if you just ignore their halos. They don't really act the part. Panty, for a lack of a better description, is a sex-crazed whore, willing to jump on and bang any hot male in the vicinity. And Stocking is a gothic Lolita ball of sarcasm whose entire diet consists solely of sweets, cakes, and other pastries. The plot of this series, if you want to call it that, is almost impossible to describe. At least in simple terms. And that's because this show is in this weird state of being many things, but at the same time, nothing at all. Loosely speaking, the series is about the 2 anarchy sisters shooting up ghosts, driving around in their Jeep, and getting yelled at by an afro-sporting priest named Garterbelt, who takes up the role of straight man in this monstrosity of vulgarity until you realize that he has a fetish for the finer things in life, like bondage and young boys. It's a show that doesn't take things all that seriously. Most episode storylines feel disconnected from any semblance of ongoing continuity, with a status quo that gets reset at the end of every half episode. Also, yes, half episode. There are 2 stories for every traditionally length episode, which oddly makes the show feel as twice as long as it is. Up to you if that's actually a good thing or not. Either way, each episode goes more and more off the rails than the last. One episode, the show could be a zombie-like story, and the next it's a Monster of the Week show featuring a cameo by a relative of the great and mighty Pooh. It's like a hilarious parody of Western media, made to look like an old 90s Craig McCracken animated show from Cartoon Network, with the toilet humor that you'd see from something like South Park. But at the same time, the show is most definitely still an anime. Even with the large surplus of Western references, stereotypical anime tropes are still present, including a traditional magical girl transformation sequence animated in what one would consider a traditional anime style. Now, as I mentioned, loincloth and leotard looks like a Craig McCracken animation. It's just the low detail style it's got going for it. And honestly, it really works. It's like when you look at cel-shaded video games like Wind Waker years down the line, it still holds up and probably will for many a year to come. Granted, it's not the only style that the show has, it's just the main one. Depending on the episode, the animation can change wildly to fit the mood, with only the rare occasion when the show will actually go full anime on your ass. Hell, there are even times when animation is just not good enough for the show. After the defeat of every major ghost, for example, we get to see a live-action model of them do a Super Sentai explosion into many pieces. Sometimes even back again, because why the hell not? The only other animation tidbit I have that is leaking out of my brain requires me to make a reference to Dead Leaves, considering its similar animation style and identical directors. But considering how I don't really like Dead Leaves and I consider it an hour of my life that I'm never ever gonna get back, I think we're just gonna leave it at that for now. Sound-wise, the OST is gorgeous, with a good chunk of it being this mixture of several different genres and styles, with the majority of it, or at least the most notable parts of it, being heavy electronica. Examples of this are Corset theme, and of course the magical transformation theme, Fly Away. Also of note is the track Juice, which is less of a song and more of a collection of female orgasmic sounds playing over smooth jazz. In other words, it's my unofficial replacement for any joke that would have required the use of Careless Whisper. Now the dub. Oh my god, the dub. It might just be its unabashed use of profanity, which I oh so rarely get to hear, or the fact that it reminds me of one of my favorite dubs of all time, Black Lagoon. But this dub is one of the few examples that I can name where, honestly, I don't see myself ever watching this sub. I did, of course, for an episode to try it out, see what it sounded like, and do a little bit of comparison in my mind, but honestly, as an English speaker, I don't see a reason to say to go watch that, because the dub just works so much better. This is, of course, in my own opinion. Dub haters can go that way. Shoot. It's all great, too. Jamie Marshy, Chris Sabat trying to sound like a giant black man, Klinkenbeard and Lay as demonic Team Rocket sisters, and also, to hear Monica Rial sprout expletives is a refreshing and welcome change. Like, I watch Angelic Layer at least once a year, and shows like Fullmetal Panic and Soul Eater on a fairly regular basis as well. Couple that with me digging my way through the Sergeant Frog dub, and yes, Monica Rial swearing her ass off was highly entertaining for me. What did suck, though, through no fault of the dub makers at all, was just how little of it there was. I don't think I would be wrong in saying that despite the show being called Panty and Stalking, it's Panty who takes up the majority of the spotlight. Stalking only really gets like one episode to herself, while Panty has at least 2 full episodes on her own. Even when the episodes doesn't specifically focus on one or the other, Panty is still the one getting the majority of the screen time. I'm not sure if that's just because the production staff liked Panty's more risque nature, but for someone like me who preferred the less sex-crazed of the two sisters, this was a bit of a disappointment. Speaking of disappointments and tying into that whole Panty taking the spotlight thing, did you know that she has the entire last episode in a bit to herself? Well, that is, of course, until the after-credits scene where... Oh. No. Shouldn't say that. I almost spoiled the secret. The after-credits scene of the show caused a little bit of a ruckus, you might say. But to properly explain my frustration with it, let's talk a little bit about Gainax. Anime 201. Gainax Endings. Named after the studio with the most well-known examples of this phenomenon, a Gainax ending occurs when what any rational person would think was supposed to happen in a story does not. Instead, the show's writers take a more shotgun approach to the plot's finale, leaving more holes than answers. What could have been neatly tied up is instead left to rot, either due to negligence or a failed sequel hook that just never came to fruition. Examples include the 1995 anime Neon Genesis Evangelion, a series whose final episodes had the production value reminiscent of a high schooler's animation project written by their elementary school sibling, with its final scene congratulating the main character for... something. Follow that up in 1998, Gainax released Kare Kano and decided to end its 26-episode run at a point where some would consider it just a bit too early. You know, because a new story arc was just getting started. More recently, in 2007, Gainax's Gurren Lagann ended, well as one would expect it to. It actually managed to end in a somewhat coherent manner until you actually remember that there was this flashback-like scene at the very beginning of episode 1, and then apparently someone decided to take a torch to whatever plan they had in mind for the show, because continuity? What's continuity anyway? Is that something that actually matters? Gainax endings aren't just limited to Gainax shows either, like Future Diary, Madoka Rebellion, Razafon, hell, Berserk, All examples of Gainax endings. If your ending suddenly goes off the rails and dives deep into mindfuck territory, then congratulations. A Gainax ending it has become. But are these endings really nonsensical? Are they all just endings left to rot by their writers, either due to laziness or lack of experience? Or perhaps, are they the most brilliantly written, skillfully executed endings that we have ever seen? The kind of ending that challenges the viewer to look beyond the obvious, to see the true ending that lies beneath. Nah. In this case, Gainax are just the biggest freaking trolls in the universe. Seriously though, as screwed up as the last episode of the show is and how out of left field that final scene is, I could forgive all of it just because of the nonsensical nature of the show to begin with. Now, if you have an episode that leaves everybody infected with the zombie plague and then just forgets that it ever happened 5 minutes later, you can't expect any serious development to really stick in this universe. However, I would be lying if I said that the ending didn't at least slightly irk me, with the ending being paramount and all. Considering that it more or less wrapped up everything in this nice little bow, and then had the gall to have this after-credits scene that screws over any sense of narrative that the ending had previous to that, with a plot twist that makes less sense than Panty living happily on a farm, which is something that actually happened only scenes earlier. Only then to tell our secondary characters that, oh, by the way, you know this evil plot that you spent the last 20 minutes thwarting? Yeah, you gotta do that over again, but in a new city. And then to end on a black screen with white text that says, to be continued next season. As a reminder, this show aired in 2010. It is now 2015. And where's season 2, Gainax? I don't see it anywhere. Oh, and to add insult to injury, that final episode, came out on Christmas Eve of that year. Yeah, I know a lot of anime fans that refer to it as the year that Gainax ruined Christmas. So thanks for that, jackasses. I am kidding though, Gainax. You guys are awesome. This show is amazing. So let me put it this way. If you're looking for a good comedy to pass the time and laugh away a couple of hours, you could do much worse. Sure, you have to watch it with the TV turned away from the door and headphones on so that nobody in the nearby vicinity thinks you're watching porn, but at least you can enjoy yourself while you do it.
Hey, phrasing!
It's not perfect, of course. Several storylines around the midpoint, I will admit, weren't that fun to watch, Chuck to the Future being the one that really sticks out to me. But the high points beyond the general not safe for work content, like the Team Rocket style villains, the sibling rivalry, even Garter's hypocritical rants, make up for it overall. And by the time the final episode comes around, the show has picked itself back up from falling more or less flat on its ass, and then proceeds to go out with a bang. Or an ungodly amount of sword swipes, whichever you prefer. I don't think we're ever actually going to see a season 2, especially considering that the majority of the production staff has moved over to Studio Trigger, and there's probably some legal issues preventing them from making a second season even if they wanted to. But if they did continue it, I would not be surprised if they just picked up where they left off. And by that, I mean they're just going to ignore the fact that after-credits scene ever happened and return back to the status quo that the entire first season had. They might reference the after-credits scene as like a joke or an offhanded thing, but they're not gonna actually let that stick. There's like almost no way. We'll have to see though. And so with all that in mind, I present Bloomers and Pantyhose with the recommendation to buy it. It's a small enough series where the price of admission is totally worth it, just for the amount of entertainment that you get. It makes up for everything. However, if you don't want to buy it, or you just want to try it out, which is totally understandable, at the time of this video, the series has been licensed by Funimation, and as such is available on their website for legal streaming if you happen to have access to it. Beyond episode 2, however, both the sub and dub are behind their subscriber paywall, so watch out for that. For alternate anime recommendations, I point you towards another madness and nonsensical anime from Gainax, Fooly Cooly, or FLCL for short. Same length and a differing animation style from the norm, leaning towards the more wacky, I will admit. Though I do have some small misgivings about the show, which I talk about in my review of it. Shameless plug. Also recommended is the quack experimental animation known only as Excel Saga, as this was more or less Panty and Stocking before Panty and Stocking, just without the raunchy language and a more varied amount of Japanese pop culture to offset the amount of Western influence. Still, if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it. And between those two, you should find something to your liking. And that's it from me. Please subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Follow me on Twitter if you feel so inclined. And hey, if you like what I do here and feel like helping out, please consider going and checking out my Patreon page. And if you feel it within your heart, also consider donating. very special thanks to Walter Kelly, Joshua, Nikolai Gray, Derek Chan, and Lori Payne for donating already. You guys are amazingly awesome, and you have no idea how many takes I did to make sure I didn't screw up any of your names in that order. It was a few, but I did it, because you guys are awesome and totally worth it. Seriously. So until next time, ladies, gentlemen, and others, stay frosty.